Hey guys, what's up? It's been a while since we did a Glen's WWE thoughts, but we're going to do one right now. We're going to talk about what just happened this past week on the SuperStar Shake-Up. It's actually Thursday that I'm recording this. Part of the reason why I waited is because I wanted to see what was also going on with how they would handle these things on the other shows like 205 and NXT, and I saw some issues there too. I'm sure, like most people, you were confused, perplexed, and bewildered by this shakeup. Why some of the decisions were made that they were made. I do know that some guys did have travel issues, so that may have changed plans. That might explain why some of the things happened the way they did. But I don't know. There's still certain things that just kind of didn't make sense. So let's start basically with the probably the biggest elephant in the room was the start of Monday Night Raw with that 8-man tag match. They started out with the War Raiders being the big surprise, being on Monday Night Raw. But of course, they're now called the Viking Experience. And yeah, that went over like a fart in church for most fans. And I mean, again, it's coming out now that the reason why is like, oh, well, we can't have war, publicly traded company, national television, big corporate sponsors, etc. And I get that to an extent. I do. But why the Viking Experience? Why not just the Vikings? Or Viking Raiders? Oh, maybe that was not so good. I don't know. Either way, the Viking Experience seems odd, in my opinion. It sounds very 80s to me. Which sometimes I think Vince is still living in. But okay, cool. But then why change their individual names? What was wrong with Hanson and Rowe? But again, it is what it is. They've moved on. That was probably the biggest thing. Honestly, I just don't understand. Ironically, they're still the NXT Tag Team Champions, yet they didn't come out. They were told, Cole and Graves and all them made a big deal about them being the NXT Tag Team Champions. Then why couldn't they bring the NXT Tag Team? That's one thing that's always kind of bothered me a little bit when these NXT guys make surprise appearances on big WWE shows. If they're the current champions, why don't they bring their belts? Which is weird, because when Ciampa and Gargano were on a couple weeks ago, and they were the NXT and North American champions respectively, they brought their belts out. When Ember Moon and Andrade made surprise appearances in the Royal Rumble, and they were the current NXT and women's champion, they wore their belts out. But then Royal Rumble last year, Pete Dunne, NXT UK champion, no title. Doesn't bring the belt, doesn't have the belt with them. And don't get me wrong, it's not like the Intercontinental Champion or the US Champion came out wearing their belts either. But I mean, I don't understand. If they were the current NXT Tag Team Champions, should they not have still been carrying their NXT Tag Team titles with them? Just seems odd. I don't know. But, I mean, obviously, it looks like the Street Profits are going to be the new NXT Tag Team Champions next week because they've got a title match against the War Raiders, which, ironically, on the NXT programming, they were still mentioned as being the War Raiders. And there was nothing mentioned about them going to Raw, as far as I recall. I could be wrong on that. I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments. And that brings up a whole other issue with NXT, but I'll get to that later. Well, the Viking Experience it is. So then later on in the show, they showed a graphic everyone had moved over already. Yet Aleister Black and Ricochet and EC3 were not shown on the graphic. Yet none of them had been previously assigned to Raw officially. All these NXT guys that had been on Raw and SmackDown for like the last 4 months, because like it was before the Royal Rumble when they brought most of these guys on. When they started running those promos like late last year, talking about, oh, these guys are coming to Raw and SmackDown, and then like 4 months of not being assigned, wrestling on both shows for most of them, especially Black and Ricochet. And apparently they don't warrant acknowledgement that they are now officially part of the Raw roster. It was acknowledged after Raw on WWE.com that they were part of Raw officially, and it was mentioned that they must be part of Raw officially since they're here wrestling on Raw tonight, which, I mean, Roman Reigns wrestled on Raw, and we all know what happened with him at the end of the Shake-Up as well. So it's kind of a weird statement to make. It seems to be lack of consistency on how they do this, which has always been an issue for me, because that's all. I mean, I guess at least in the previous years, at least when there used to be general managers and they used to have matches to decide who got picks, at least that kind of made more sense. And these guys wrestled as, hey, I'm a SmackDown superstar wrestling on Raw against a Raw superstar to see who's going to get a pick. You know, that at least made sense to me. The way they do it now is like, hey, we're just randomly moving people over and we're going to make it seem like it's a thing. And it's like, I don't know. I really don't like the SuperStar Shake-Up anymore. When it was a draft and it was brands, I liked it. Now it doesn't seem to have the same appeal. But then the other thing that was on the graphic is they show Eric Young out of the blue. No mention that he had changed brands until that moment. So Sanity's no more, clearly. I have no idea what they're going to do with these guys. Sanity was such a cool team in NXT that they did absolutely nothing with when they brought them up to SmackDown. I feel really bad for all those guys. I actually know somebody who went to school with Eric Young, and he's still friends with Eric Young to this day. And I'd be curious to know if he could find out for me what Eric Young thinks about his WWE main roster run so far. Because, I mean, it's been fairly uneventful. I don't know. I don't know. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, Eric Young is tremendously talented. We all saw what he did in Impact, in TNA, whatever you want to call it. We all saw what he could do. He could do comedy, he could do serious, he could do everything, and he was great at all of it. So I have no doubt, if given the right opportunities, Eric Young will land on his feet no problem. But I mean, outside of that, it's like, I don't know. And then what does that mean for Wolf and Dane? I mean, are they still Sanity? Are they still a tag team called Sanity? I don't know. Maybe Sanity didn't actually break up. Maybe they just lost a member. I guess we'll find out if they ever appear on TV again, because God knows they don't very often. But, you know, whatever. To me, I felt that was kind of like insulting to Eric Young, because, again, no fanfare whatsoever. It's just like, hey, here it is. Because, like, I get it. Maybe Eric Young was one of the guys that couldn't make it to the show. But you put a graphic together for Cedric Alexander, like a whole video package advertising that Cedric Alexander was now part of Raw. Why couldn't you do something like that for Eric Young? Unless he's getting a complete gimmick repackage, in which case, oh, well, these videos wouldn't fit because this was all Sanity footage. Of course, they have to have him wrestle on SmackDown to actually have some footage, because where were they going to get most of the footage from? Probably NXT. Yeah, we'll move on from that. That was pretty much the only real issues I had with Raw, to be completely honest. I didn't know about this. I read about it afterwards. Apparently after the show, when they showed who was officially part of Raw, they put Lars Sullivan, and then the next night they decided, no, Lars Sullivan's part of SmackDown instead. And apparently even for a brief time when it was showing the list of changes, Lars Sullivan was listed on both, apparently. I wish I had seen that. That would have been pretty funny, but whatever. Moving on to SmackDown, of course, we have Finn Balor and the Intercontinental title going over to SmackDown, which is interesting because the US title is also on SmackDown, which means there's no secondary title on Raw currently. Now, this I have a feeling, because I just heard today that live event they're doing on Sunday to promote the Shield's really final match, Dean Ambrose's final appearance in WWE, which I'm sure you've seen it by now, all the memes on the internet about that. 2045, the Shield's final match. But anyways, yeah, they did. Apparently, it is a live show. Like, it is actually a live event. Like, it's not a pre-taped thing. It is going to air live as it's happening. And apparently, the Intercontinental title is on the line during the show. I didn't hear who Finn Balor's defending against. I don't know if that's even been announced. But my guess is it is going to be against a Raw superstar. And my guess is he's going to lose the Intercontinental title, and that's how they're going to get the Intercontinental title back on Raw. My issue with that is that you have him now on... again, you gave him the Intercontinental title for the second time and not let him keep it for very long. And it starts to become kind of like the Sasha Banks thing, right? Sasha Banks, like, is tremendously talented. You made her women's champion multiple times, but she never once successfully defended the thing. And now, well, the Sasha Banks topic is another topic, and maybe we'll touch on it when we're done talking about this. Then, of course, like most people, I was curious about what was going on with Paige. Her whole, I'm going to bring a tag team in to challenge the Iconics. Was it going to be some people from NXT? Like, a lot of people were saying online, oh, well, maybe it'll be the Sky Pirates, Io Shirai and Kairi Sane. Some people were, like, thinking that maybe it was, like, a team from outside of the WWE. I actually heard somebody say the Beautiful People, which I didn't think was going to happen because that's kind of a weird fit for Paige. That's not really her thing. Not to mention, I think the Beautiful People have signed contracts with somebody recently, so I don't think that was going to happen. But yeah, like, there was, like, like most people, I was like, let's see what happens. And I don't think I'm alone in saying I'm disappointed with who she brought out. And for two reasons. Like, yes, it's great that they found something to do with Asuka. Because God knows they haven't done much with Asuka after she lost to Charlotte at WrestleMania a year ago. They gave her the SmackDown title eventually, but they didn't really give her a good run with it. The only real good feud and match I think she really had was with Becky Lynch at the Royal Rumble. But then they had her drop the title back to Charlotte just so that they could put both titles in the main event at WrestleMania, which I understood ended up being necessary, but honestly was not the right call. That, in my opinion, they messed that whole angle up from day one. From, like, the moment the moment they again, that's another topic. I should do these videos more often because clearly I've got a lot to rant about. So yeah, I think it's cool that they've come up with something to use for Asuka, and I think Kairi Sane does deserve to be on the main roster. I'm not complaining about that. I'm complaining about that they broke up the Sky Pirates already before they were even given a real good run in NXT of any kind. I'm a little perplexed by that. I get it that they probably don't feel Io Shirai is ready for the main roster yet, and maybe she isn't. But I think it would have been more impactful for them to come up together as a tag team, or even get to challenge the Iconics in NXT for the titles on like maybe the next takeover or something like that. But it is what it is. It's happened, and I mean, I'm not upset that Kairi Sane's on SmackDown now. I think that's great for her, but I've always liked Kairi Sane's character. I think, she's very talented and whatnot, so good for her, but I don't know. I think it could have been done differently. Ironically, there was something I was kind of hoping it was, but I knew it was a very long shot. And again, because this actually ties in with the other two things that I almost started ranting about a few minutes ago, maybe I will actually talk about this afterwards. So, and then SmackDown closed with Elias coming to SmackDown, and then Roman Reigns coming out, and apparently we're getting a Roman Reigns versus Elias feud, which, correct me if I'm wrong, we've already had on Raw. And the whole point of the SuperStar Shake-Up is new superstars, new feuds. Moving the feud to SmackDown doesn't make it new. It's just a different venue. So, I mean, I'm hoping it was a one-off and that Roman's going to split off into some other storyline, feuding maybe with Vince McMahon somehow. I don't know. I guess they're going to try the don't cross the boss angle again and see if they can get Roman over again, because I mean, personally, I like Roman Reigns. I don't have an issue with him. I get what his role in the company is. I understand what it is. I know some fans have issues with it, and that's fine. That's your opinion, obviously. What I don't understand is why. Well, no, I'm sorry. I kind of veered off there a little bit. Sorry. What I was going to say is, I get that some people don't like it, and that's cool, but obviously everyone's a decent human being. So of course, when Roman announced that he had leukemia and he had to drop the Universal title, people felt genuinely bad for the guy, and people were very happy to see him make a comeback, because at the end of the day, whether you liked Roman Reigns' character, whether you liked the way the WWE was using him or not, you're a compassionate human being. You care about the human being. You care about Joe, not Roman. Joe, right? As he always said, right? It's like, this isn't coming from Roman, this is coming from Joe. You care about him. You care about him as a human being. You're compassionate, and that's great. And so everyone was happy to see him back, and everyone was happy to see him for the first couple weeks. But let's be honest, we're now getting, it's, now that he's kind of back, and now he's starting to get back into Roman mode. And the fans are starting to remember, oh yeah, this is the guy that we don't really like, because the WWE's trying to make him the star, and we don't really want him to be the star. Ironically, if the WWE wasn't trying to make him a star, those same people would probably be like, why aren't they pushing Roman? He's so good. But that's just how wrestling is, right? We want it until we don't want it anymore, right? So, so my guess is their latest new thing to try is to have him, it worked for Becky Lynch, it worked for Daniel Bryan, it worked for Stone Cold Steve Austin. Why can't it work for Roman Reigns too? So we'll see where it goes. I don't have a problem with Roman being on SmackDown. Obviously, it's fine. With AJ moving over to Raw, obviously it makes sense that you need to have, because let's be honest, they're the top two guys probably in the company, along with Seth Rollins, and with Seth staying on Raw and AJ moving over to Raw, they needed to bring another big star over to SmackDown, and that's fine. Obviously, Kofi's starting to get over huge, obviously, which is great for Kofi. I'm really happy. I've always liked Kofi Kingston's character, even when he was doing the silly Jamaican gimmick. Super talented guy, just fun to watch. I hope he gets a decent run with the title, even if it's his only one. I hope it's a decent one. I hope he has some good. I'd like to see him hold the title to at least SummerSlam, hopefully. If it ends after that, cool. We got a run, and it was great, and it was fun. I get the business moves quickly and whatnot. So yeah, that was the shakeup in general. But then there was some fallout from that for some other shows. So first and foremost, because Buddy Murphy, of course, also is on SmackDown. Mustafa Ali, Ali, is also already on SmackDown. He got moved up a while ago, and now, of course, Cedric Alexander is on Raw. So they pretty much decimated 205 Live at this point. The rosters, they basically, like in the last year, 205 Live has lost 3 major stars, and they've gained 1, maybe 2. I know they're really trying to push what is it, Alberto Carrillo or whatever his name is. I'm sure I'm butchering that and saying that wrong. And then they also brought in Oni Lorcan. Now, Oni Lorcan's fantastic. I love him, but I love him and Danny Burch as a tag team. I'm sorry. Their matches that they had in NXT with the Undisputed Era, and also the match they had with the Grizzled Young Veterans on NXT UK were fantastic. These guys are so good as a team. Don't get me wrong, they're great as single competitors too, but I love them as a team, and it kind of sucks that they're more or less broken up now. That is one thing I've kind of never liked about the Superstar Shake-Up, is the WWE's obsession with breaking up tag teams. Although, like most people, I am quite happy that Bobby Roode and Chad Gable got broken up out of this one, because that tag team was boring. I wouldn't mind seeing Chad Gable get back together with Shelton Benjamin again, because God knows they're not doing anything with him. But yeah, whatever. It's all good. But yeah, 205 got completely decimated. And then, speaking of which, then you watch the opening, and Buddy Murphy and Cedric Alexander are still in there, but they already got Oni Lorcan in there. And it's like, you knew these changes were coming, WWE. Shouldn't you have produced a new opening package? Especially, like, you had at least 24 hours to get Cedric Alexander out of there. But that's nitpicking anyways, let's be honest. We already kind of touched about the NXT title situation, obviously, as well, tag team title situation. Like I said, they announced during NXT that the War Raiders, and they did say the War Raiders, were defending the NXT Tag Team Championship next week against the Street Profits. So, again, like I said, safe bet, new NXT Tag Team Champions, because clearly the War Raiders aren't coming back. So that will probably be their last match in NXT. What was interesting is the opening match was that cross-brand match, which was originally going to be 205's Buddy Murphy challenging, I think that's how it was advertised too throughout the entire time, against NXT's Velveteen Dream for the NXT North American title. And Buddy Murphy came out, and it was the SmackDown Live graphic that came up for his name, which is fine, because again, and they acknowledged that, yeah, he's the newest superstar on SmackDown. But then later on in the women's title match between Shayna Baszler and Kairi Sane, they mentioned that Kairi Sane's also gone to SmackDown, but her name comes up in the NXT graphic. Like, no consistency in the production, even on the same show. Like, and I get it that this show was actually taped a couple weeks ago and so forth, and the announcers dubbed over the whole, like, oh, they just got drafted to SmackDown stuff and so forth. Or maybe we're already aware that these changes were going to happen by the time the show aired, and so they could say it. I don't, one way or the other. But there was, like, no consistency in the production. You put the SmackDown graphic for Buddy Murphy's name, but not for Kairi Sane's. And Kairi Sane actually came out on SmackDown and wrestled in a match, whereas Buddy Murphy was just announced in a video package, like Cedric Alexander was on Raw. So it's like that bugs me, because it's like, again, it's like, if you're making such a big deal about this, like, you need to have consistency across the board, and there was no consistency. And then the last thing, and this actually goes back to after SmackDown, like I said, when they throw it up, all the changes that were made, Mickie James, Chad Gable, Apollo Crews, and Liv Morgan are all now part of SmackDown. with no fanfare whatsoever. Again, could have done video packages for all of these and played them throughout SmackDown if they weren't there for whatever reason. And we know Liv Morgan was there because she was on Raw the night before. So we know she made it to the arena. We know Chad Gable was there because he made it. He was in a match on Raw too. Maybe Apollo Crews and Mickie James didn't make it. I don't know. Maybe they were the ones held up in travel. But again, you could have made video packages for it. But that just shows you how little they care about those people, which is a shame. And it's like, I get it that they're lower card people in this scenario, but it's like, if every change is supposed to be meaningful, then make them all meaningful, you know? So yeah, so let's, that's all I really got about the shake-up. So you know what, let's go back and let's talk about briefly about, let's talk first briefly about the Sasha Banks situation. So the rumor was, or the story is anyways, supposedly Sasha Banks was not happy about losing the tag team titles at WrestleMania so quickly after winning them. Fair. And that she's basically just quit. And there is a lot of evidence to support this, obviously. Some of the tweets she put out basically suggested that that is definitely how she's feeling. And maybe she is. Don't get me wrong. I'm not disagreeing that it's probably a safe bet that is how she's feeling. She probably thought they were going to get a lengthy run, and for whatever reason they didn't. But yes, she did stop following WWE on Twitter, and she is now following AEW. But that was the only change. She is still following a lot of the other WWE platform stuff. So I don't know if that is the type of thing that some people sometimes do, just to like, yeah, it's like, oh, if that's what everyone thinks, I'm going to play into that, because then no one really knows what's going on. And this is the thing, it's not a bad way to do it, because I can see this going two ways. I could see this being that, yes, everyone's right, and that's exactly what's happening. But I could also see it being a situation where Sasha is aware of what people are saying, and she's like, hey, this will make my return that much more of a shock, because everyone believes that this is what's going on, so I'll just play up to it. Sasha was on vacation right after WrestleMania. She was with her husband, who does, by the way, work for the WWE as a seamstress, if you did not know. Even though, yes, he is also an indie wrestler as well, but he is also employed by the WWE, just not as a wrestler. I don't see him going away. That's the thing. The second thing is also that she was on vacation with Kalisto as well, which I get, they're all friends. They've been friends for a long time now, and that's great. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I have a feeling that that's all it was. It was just a vacation. Kalisto was not on TV this week, as far as I can remember. 205 Live was a bit of a blur for me, so I don't actually remember. Maybe he was on the show, and again, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Yeah, Kalisto was, I think it was just that. It was a vacation. I'm not saying she wasn't frustrated or anything like that, but I don't know that necessarily means she actually did quit the WWE. Like I said, she could just be playing up with what everyone believes anyways, just to make her return more impactful. Now, I know that also meant that there's like other people looking at what Bayley tweeted, where she tweeted, "We're still a tag team, blah, 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 blah." And then she shows up on SmackDown as part of the shake-up, and she says, "I'm here as a singles competitor." And a lot of people are like, well, you know, that's because, you know, Sasha's not coming back. Like, maybe they finally had the conversation and she's now officially done. And that could be true. It could be. But it wouldn't shock me if it turns out that that's all a ruse as well. I could see this leading to Sasha making a surprise appearance and returning either on Raw or SmackDown to be Becky's new challenger. Becky did tweet out, just Sasha Banks fight me. But you know, The thing is I don't think Sasha believes some of the things she tweeted regardless of where she's going. I think even if she is legitimately leaving the WWE, I think some of the stuff she tweeted was, again, still just to like, yeah, this is what you think. I might as well just say what you guys think, and maybe you guys will leave it alone kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know where her head's at. Nobody knows where her head's at. It's kind of foolish for us to sit there and speculate about stuff we don't actually know. Yet I'm doing it anyways. With that said, let's go back to the whole Becky Lynch situation then. I said earlier that I think the WWE screwed up that whole storyline, and I honestly do. So they wanted to make it a bigger deal because it was the first ever women's main event at WrestleMania. And I'm going to say something, and it's not going to sit well with the Charlotte Flair fans or the Ronda Rousey fans. The only reason why fans bought into the idea that that was going to be the main event at WrestleMania and didn't rebel against it in any way, shape, or form was because of Becky Lynch. There was something Becky tweeted during this angle that I 100% agree with. And actually, no, I think Ronda actually tweeted it, now that I think about it. It might have been Ronda who tweeted it. But again, I still agree with it. And it was literally, if Vince didn't have the confidence to make Ronda versus Charlotte the main event at Survivor Series, why would he do it at WrestleMania? And I agree with that. Now, I know that early on, before SummerSlam, that was probably the goal. It was probably going to be like, we're going to do Charlotte versus Ronda Rousey as a main event next year at WrestleMania, and this is how we're going to go about it. Hence, they shoehorned Charlotte into the triple threat match against Carmella with Becky Lynch for the SmackDown title way back in SummerSlam. Why Charlotte won the title, but they did not expect the WWE to react to that title change the way they did. And so the WWE realized they needed to run with it. And that was good. But how they ran with it was more complicated than it ever needed to. I think everything was fine up until Survivor Series. The way the angle was playing up right up until Survivor Series, where, and I don't know where the WWE's mindset was at that point. I don't know if they still thought somehow they were going to get back to the Charlotte Ronda. I think that's what it was. I think they still thought somehow they were going to get back to Charlotte versus Ronda one-on-one at WrestleMania. But okay, you know what? The fans want Becky. We'll give them Becky. But then now they saw how Becky and Ronda played off each other at, going into Survivor Series, and how over Becky was at that point. I think everything would have been fine had everything just stayed the way it was, but unfortunately Becky got hurt. Because Nia Jax potatoed her, because apparently Nia Jax doesn't know how to throw a punch. I'm not going to get into that, but anyways. But yeah, Becky got hurt, and they had to come up with a match that was going to be just as good. And to be blunt, Charlotte was the right choice in this situation. This was their first mistake, was how they handled that. I was okay with Charlotte getting herself disqualified. I think, though, the better solution, they should have had Ronda just beat her. And I think, again, the reason why they chose the disqualification route was because in the WWE's eyes, Becky was going to be an afterthought, and come WrestleMania, it's going to be Charlotte versus Ronda again, and we want to make sure that, there was no definitive winner before. However, in hindsight, but again, this was how I would have booked it back then too. Like, I was thinking more along the lines of, hey, Becky's over. Let's run with this. Charlotte can always have another year, right? Like, it's not like Charlotte's career's going anywhere at this point. As long as she stays healthy, and she has, I don't see why she can't have a main event spot at WrestleMania another year or any other time. So the way I would have booked it is I would have had Ronda beat Charlotte. And yeah, Becky gave Charlotte the blessing and so forth, and they hugged before the Survivor Series and so forth. All they had to do was, like, the next night, literally, they could have had Becky Lynch blame Charlotte and say, it's your fault, blah, 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 blah. And that could have spun out again, extended that feud up until the point where it could have gone either way at the Royal Rumble, whichever one of them won. Even if it was Charlotte at that point. Charlotte wins the Rumble. She goes on to WrestleMania, faces Ronda Rousey. I think it would have been fine. But they didn't go that route. They basically had made it a three-way feud ever since. Which meant, inevitably, it probably had to end in a three-way feud. But the way they booked the Royal Rumble part, it was fine. So you get to the Royal Rumble, Charlotte's in there. Becky comes out, takes Carmella's place, or Lana's place. It was Lana, sorry. Takes Lana's place in the Rumble, even though she already lost to Asuka earlier in the night. She ends up winning the Royal Rumble. Boom. Here's the thing. Becky's injury was a work. And that was where it kind of all went down. Because, and anyone who doesn't believe that, watch the Royal Rumble back. When she gets pushed off the steps by Nia Jax, she's holding the one leg, but then she's hopping around on the other and holding the other leg later. And that's the leg they went with going forward. I think she's holding, if I remember correctly, it's her right knee she's holding after she goes off the stairs. Oh, she's hurt her right knee, blah, 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 blah. And then after the match is over, while she's fighting Charlotte, she starts holding her left knee, and suddenly her right knee's perfectly fine. But it's like, so they messed that up. So right there, you know it was a work. She was never hurt. The whole thing going on crutches and all that was just for story purposes, because this was how they were going to get to the triple threat. And here's the thing. None of that was necessary. All Charlotte had to do was come out, and instead of congratulating Becky with the golf clap like she did, all she had to do was come out and demand that she be put in the match as well. Because she should have won, because Becky wasn't supposed to be in the Royal Rumble match. There's your triple threat. Clean, simple, makes sense. Everyone would have been happy. But no, they had to drag it out. They had to oh, we're going to suspend Becky Lynch. Oh, we're going to replace Becky Lynch. Oh, we're going to make Becky Lynch have to fight for her title shot again. And that's the part that really killed me. She earned the title shot. She was suspended. When she was initially reinstated from the suspension, she was back in the title match again. But then Vince suspended her. And now and even though she came back from the suspension a second time before the WrestleMania, now she's not in the match anymore? That doesn't make sense. Well, and some people were like, well, they had Charlotte replace her and so forth. It's like, yeah, but she still earned the title shot. And she's eligible to wrestle, so therefore you can't say she can't have it. But yet she had to fight Charlotte again. The match at Fastlane would have made more sense had it been, if Charlotte wins, it's a triple threat match. But if she loses, it's Becky versus Ronda. But that's the thing. At the end of the day, if Becky had not been put back into that match, no one would have... I'm not going to say no one. And then they turned around and said, oh, the Charlotte versus Ronda match is going to be the main event at WrestleMania. It's going to be the last match on the show. I'm not saying it still wouldn't have been good. I'm sure it would have been great. But I don't think the fans would have accepted it the same way. The fans accepted it because they accept Becky. The fans don't accept Ronda. Only half the fans really accept Charlotte. The fans accept Becky. That's why it was believable as the main event. That's what made it the main event. That said, I still wouldn't have booked it that way. And I know it probably wouldn't have worked the way I would have booked it either, because clearly Ronda, she's officially tweeted out that she's done with WWE for now, because her and her husband are going to try and start a family and good for them. I wish them the best of luck and all that stuff. But the way I would have done it is, there was a point where it looked like Asuka was injured. Now, turns out she wasn't. She was fine, and that's great and so forth. I'm glad she wasn't, because nobody wants to see that. But she was originally supposed to defend the SmackDown Women's title, if I remember correctly, against Mandy Rose. If I remember correctly, I think that was going into Fastlane, if I remember correctly. The way I would have booked it is, we were already at that point where it looked like it was going to be a triple threat. Charlotte had already been put in a main event spot. The way I would have done it is, I would have played it completely differently. I wouldn't have had Ronda drop the belt just to take it back. I wouldn't have had I wouldn't have announced that the Charlotte versus Becky Lynch match was like to determine whether it was a one-on-one or a triple threat match. What I would have done, this is how I would have done it. When they reinstated Becky, I would have announced that Becky was going to face Charlotte at Fastlane, and since both of them have now been promised a title shot against Ronda Rousey, the winner gets to choose which title they fought for. The loser would then still go on to face the other women's champion at WrestleMania. And that could have been a rematch against Asuka, in this case for Charlotte. And Becky could have won, and then we would have got Becky versus Ronda one-on-one for the Raw Women's title, Charlotte one-on-one with Asuka for the SmackDown Women's title. That said, I would have also, if it turned out Asuka had been hurt, then I would have replaced Asuka with Naomi. They could have gone one-on-one with Mandy Rose for the vacant SmackDown Women's title, and the winner would face Charlotte at WrestleMania. I probably would have leaned towards Mandy Rose, but whatever. That's neither here nor there at this point. I would have also let Bayley and Sasha retain the women's tag team titles. End of WrestleMania, 4 horsewomen holding up the belts. And I would have brought up, although it's too early to bring up the other two, but I would have brought up the rest of the UFC 4 horsewomen from NXT and spin that off into a feud going into the summer. 4 horsewomen versus 4 horsewomen, because God knows it's probably never going to happen now. If Sasha really has left the WWE, it's not going to happen. If Ronda Rousey's starting a family, who knows if she ever comes back. So we may never get the payoff of that standoff out in the parking lot at the NXT arena after the Mae Young Classic, the first Mae Young Classic. So it is what it is. Can't change it, but that's more or less what I would have done. I would have given like the happy go home shot of all 4 women from the WWE's 4 horsewomen, Charlotte, Becky, Bayley, and Sasha, holding up their respective women's titles to close out the show. I know other people were hoping that that's how it was going to go too, although I know they had different ways of getting to it and so forth. I know some people, even after Charlotte did win the SmackDown Women's title and it was whatever, I know some people were thinking it was still only going to be for the Raw Women's title. So even if Charlotte lost, she would still be the SmackDown Women's champion, but they decided to make it winner take all instead. Obviously, they decided to have Bayley and Sasha drop the titles. So that was a pipe dream at that point anyways. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Tell me if you agree, disagree. What would you have done? Who would you have changed in the shake-up? How would you have handled the shake-up? How would you have handled this whole women's title situation over the last year? And what do you think? Has Sasha left? Is she staying? Is it all a ruse? Will we ever see the 4 horsemen versus the 4 horsewomen in WWE? Probably not. Tell me what you think in the comments below. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe. I'm going to try, still trying to put out videos almost every day. Trying to. I'm not doing a great job, but I'm trying. And that's all I got for now. So thanks for joining, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.